My name is Rachel Osei. I am 36 years old. And on a Tuesday morning in September, the man who had mentored me for 7 years handed a sealed manila folder to Tanya Kellerman in Human Resources. A folder thick enough to end my career before I ever sat in the chair he promised me. I know this because Tanya told me. Not that day. 41 days later, in the back of a conference room that smelled like dry erase markers and cold coffee, with a voice so flat it could have been reading a weather report. Rachel, there have been documented concerns about your performance dating back 14 months. 14 months. That number landed somewhere between my ribs, because 14 months ago, David Langford had stood in this same building, on the 14th floor, and told me I was the future of Kessler Hadley Logistics. Those were his words. The future. Let me tell you what I did when Tanya slid that folder across the table. I opened it, I read every page, and I did not cry, I did not raise my voice, and I did not look at David, who was sitting 3 chairs to my left with his legs crossed, and his reading glasses folded neatly on the table, like a man watching a show he had already rehearsed. I turned to page 7, a written summary of a coaching conversation from March, one that never happened. My signature was not on it. No witness was listed. The date fell on a Thursday I had spent in the Houston office running a supply chain audit that saved the company $340,000 in redundant freight contracts. I was in Houston, and according to this folder, I was also in David's office, receiving a verbal warning about inconsistent stakeholder communication. Here is what I want you to understand before I go any further. I had been CCing myself on every work email for 14 months. Every single one. I started doing it without a reason I could name. It was instinct, the kind that sits in your stomach like a low hum you cannot turn off. I did not know why I was building that archive. I just knew I could not stop. Tell me, where are you right now? What time is it where you are watching this? Because wherever you are, I need you to stay with me. This story has a folder, but it also has 4,211 emails, and only one of us knew they existed. David Langford hired me at Kessler Hadley when I was 29. He was Senior Vice President of North American Operations, and I was a Regional Logistics Coordinator who had just left a company that paid me 60% of what I was worth and told me I should be grateful. David saw something, or at least, that is what I believed for a very long time. He put me on the leadership development track within my first year. He introduced me to every executive on the floor by name and told them to remember mine. In my second annual review, he wrote, and I have this in writing because I kept every review, Rachel Osei is the most operationally precise mind I've encountered in 22 years of supply chain management. She will be ready for a VP seat within 3 years. He was right. In 3 years, I was promoted to Vice President of Regional Operations. I managed a $14.2 million annual budget across 4 distribution hubs. My team hit 98.6% on-time delivery, highest in the company's history. David called me into his office the day that metric was confirmed. He closed the door. He leaned forward. And he said, "When I move to the CEO's advisory council next year, you are taking this seat. I've already told the board." That was October, 2 years ago. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He had never lied to me before. He had championed every raise, every project, every seat at every table I had ever been given. He was not just my boss. He was the man who built the ladder I climbed. What I did not know, what I could not have known, was that David had started telling a different story in rooms I was not invited to. The first incident I can trace happened in July, 15 months before that HR meeting. A quarterly leadership review with the CEO, Arthur Ridley, and the Chief Operating Officer, Sandra Voss. David's calendar listed it as Ops Leadership Strategy Sync. I was not on the invite. I asked him about it the next day, casually, in the hallway. He said it was a formality, budget alignment, nothing that required my input. Sandra Voss told me later, much later, that David had raised soft concerns about my readiness during that meeting. He said I was talented but still developing in executive-level stakeholder management. Arthur Ridley asked if I needed more time before the transition. David said yes. Sandra said nothing. She told me she thought he was protecting me. The second incident, November. A client escalation with Bridgepoint Fulfillment, our second largest account. I resolved it in 48 hours, rerouted 3 shipments, absorbed a $12,000 penalty to preserve the relationship, and personally called their COO, Nathan Weir, to walk through corrective actions. Nathan sent a written commendation to our CEO. David forwarded that email to Arthur Ridley. But he added a note at the top. I did not see this note until months later. It read, "Great outcome, but Rachel's initial response time was slower than expected. Flagging for development tracking. My initial response time was 4 hours. On a Saturday, the third incident, January, David assigned me to lead a cross-functional task force on warehouse automation, a project he publicly called the most visible initiative of the fiscal year. Privately, he restructured the reporting chain so that my updates went through his deputy, Corinne Shea, instead of directly to the board. When I asked why, he said the board preferred a single point of contact for project updates. That was a lie. Corinne confirmed it 18 months later. David had told her to filter my presentations because, his words, Rachel tends to oversimplify for the room. I had been simplifying nothing. I had been building 26 slide decks with ROI projections, risk matrices, and vendor scorecards that Corinne was not qualified to present. And every time the board saw a watered-down version, they saw Corinne's name on the cover slide. My key mistake was not stupidity. It was loyalty. I believed that the man who built me up would never be the one to take me apart. I confused his investment in me with investment in my future. They were not the same thing. His investment was in control, and the moment my future threatened his relevance, the architecture of that control shifted from scaffolding to cage. The breaking point did not arrive as a single explosion. It arrived as a sentence. In April, 5 months before that HR meeting, David called me into his office for what he described as a quick alignment check. He was standing behind his desk when I walked in. He did not sit down. He did not ask me to sit, and he said, "Rachel, I want to make sure you understand that the SVP transition is still on the table, but the timeline is fluid. The board has some questions about consistency." Consistency. That word lived in the back of my throat for 3 days. I went home that night and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and a glass of water I did not touch. I pulled up the email archive, the one I had been building for 14 months without understanding why, and for the first time, I did not just save emails. I searched them. I searched for every thread involving David, Corinne, Sandra, Arthur, and Tanya Kellerman. Here is what I found in the first 90 minutes. David had CC'd Corinne on 11 internal strategy emails that I was excluded from, emails that discussed my role, my performance metrics, and the transition timeline. In 3 of those emails, he referred to me as still developing. In one, he used the phrase, flight risk if we accelerate too quickly. In another, he told Corinne to hold the warehouse automation credit close because Rachel doesn't need the visibility right now. He was stealing my work and hiding the theft behind concern for my growth. I closed the laptop. I opened it again. I printed every email. I printed them on my home printer at 11:47 p.m., and I put them in a binder I bought from the office supply store on Route 9 the next morning. A red 3-ring binder, 2 inches thick. That binder became my spine. The next day, I walked into David's office and asked a question I had never asked before. "David, can you send me the board's specific concerns about my consistency? I'd like to address them directly." His face did something it had never done in 7 years. It paused. Not his mouth. His eyes. For half a second, the performance dropped, and I saw something underneath that was not mentorship. It was calculation. "I'll pull something together," he said. He never sent it, and that silence told me everything his words had been designed to hide. If someone who has always answered you suddenly stops, pay attention. The silence is not forgetfulness. It is a wall they built because the truth would blow the door off its hinges. I stopped asking David for clarity that week. I started building my own. Let me tell you what 4,211 emails look like when you organize them with intention. I spent 3 weeks building a timeline, not at the office, at my kitchen table, between 9 p.m. and 1 a.m., with a yellow legal pad, and a system of colored tabs I bought at Staples for $14.89. Red tabs for emails where David discussed my performance without my knowledge. Blue tabs for emails where my work was attributed to someone else. Green tabs for emails that contradicted the claims in that HR folder. Yellow tabs for emails where David praised me directly, because those were the most damning of all. The yellow tabs proved that the man who told Hekarai was underperforming was the same man who had written, in his own words, to the CEO, Rachel's Q3 freight optimization project is the single most effective cost initiative this division has produced in 5 years. That email was dated August 14th. The HR folder included a performance concern dated August 21, 1 week later, citing insufficient strategic contribution. My ally in this was a woman named Denise Achebe. Denise was senior counsel in the company's legal department. We had worked together on a vendor dispute 2 years earlier, and she had told me something then that I never forgot. Rachel, if you ever feel like the process is being used against you, bring me paper, not feelings. Paper. I brought her paper. 112 pages of it, organized chronologically, cross-referenced, and indexed by claim. Every fake coaching conversation in the HR folder matched against my actual calendar, travel receipts, and hotel booking confirmations. Every performance concern matched against client commendations, project metrics, and David's own written praise. Denise read the binder in her office on a Saturday. It took her 4 hours. When she finished, she took off her glasses and said one sentence, "This is not a performance file. This is a pretext file." She explained what that meant in legal terms. A pretext file is a manufactured paper trail designed to justify a termination or demotion that has already been decided for other reasons. It is built after the decision, not before. The inconsistencies, dates that don't align, missing signatures, coaching sessions that never occurred, are the fingerprints of fabrication. Denise told me to do 3 things. First, request a formal copy of my complete HR file under the company's employee records policy. This was my right. I had never exercised it. Second, file a written rebuttal to every item in the folder, attaching the contradicting evidence. Third, request that all future performance discussions include a neutral HR representative and be documented with both parties' consent. I did all 3 within 72 hours. Consent. That word mattered. Because David had been documenting conversations that never happened, and the moment I demanded a witness and a signature line, his entire method collapsed. You cannot fabricate a meeting that someone else is required to attend. David did not know about the binder. He did not know about Denise, and he did not know that the woman he had mentored into meticulous record-keeping had turned that training back on the trainer. He had taught me to document everything. He just never imagined I would document him. The first domino fell on a Thursday. Tanya Kellerman received my formal rebuttal, 43 pages with exhibits. She was required by company policy to review it within 10 business days. She reviewed it in 3. I know this because she called me on day 4 and asked me to come to her office. Not the conference room, her office. The door was closed when I arrived. The folder, David's folder, was open on her desk. My rebuttal was next to it, and next to that was a yellow legal pad with notes in red ink. Tanya did not look like a woman reading a routine HR file. She looked like a woman who had just realized the floor beneath her was not solid. "Rachel," she said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be precise. Were you in Houston on March 14th? Yes. Do you have documentation? Hotel receipt, flight confirmation, an email from David approving the trip." She wrote something on the legal pad. She did not show it to me. Within 2 weeks, Kessler Hadley's internal compliance team opened a review, not of my performance, but of the performance management process itself. They interviewed 11 people. David was interviewed twice. Corinne Shea was interviewed once and, according to Denise, asked to provide all emails related to the warehouse automation project. Corinne provided them. Every single one confirmed that she had been presenting my work under her name at David's explicit direction. Arthur Ridley, the CEO, received a summary briefing from compliance on a Monday. By Wednesday, David Langford was placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of a formal investigation into irregularities in supervisory documentation practices. That phrase, irregularities in supervisory documentation practices, was the corporate equivalent of saying the building was on fire without using the word fire. David sent me an email the night he was placed on leave. It was 2 sentences long. "Rachel, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Can we talk?" I did not respond. Not because I was angry, because there was nothing left to misunderstand. 7 years of mentorship had been a leash, and the moment I was close enough to the position he was vacating, he had pulled it. The conversation he wanted was not about understanding. It was about management. He wanted to manage me one last time. Sandra Voss called me the following week. She said, "I owe you an apology. I should have asked more questions in that meeting 15 months ago." I told her the apology was noted and appreciated. I did not tell her it was also late. Some truths do not need to be spoken to be heard. The investigation concluded in November. David Langford was terminated for cause. The findings cited fabricated performance documentation, failure to follow established HR protocols, misrepresentation of a direct report's contributions, and deliberate obstruction of a board-approved leadership transition. His severance package, $220,000, was voided under the company's ethics clause. Corinne Shea was reassigned. She was not terminated, but she was removed from all leadership track programming and required to complete a supervised ethics review. She sent me a message through LinkedIn 3 months later. It said, "I should have told you sooner." I did not reply. The time for telling me sooner had been sooner. I was appointed Senior Vice President of North American Operations on December 1st. The same title, the same office, the same chair David had sat in when he told me I was the future. But I did not feel what I expected to feel. There was no rush, no vindication parade. I sat in that chair on my first morning and looked at the desk, the same desk where David had leaned forward and promised me this seat. And I felt something closer to weather clearing, not sunshine. Just the absence of a storm that had been overhead so long I had stopped noticing the pressure. The red binder sits in the bottom drawer of my desk at home. I have not opened it since the investigation closed. I do not need to. It did what it was built to do. Here is what I have learned, and I am telling you this not as a lesson but as a fact. The most dangerous person in your career is not the one who opposes you openly. It is the one who builds you up with one hand and builds a case against you with the other. They are dangerous because you will defend them. You will explain away the inconsistencies. You will tell yourself that someone who invested this much in your growth could not possibly be engineering your removal. They can. And some of them are very, very good at it. I do not know why I started CCing myself on every email 14 months before that HR meeting. I have thought about it many times. The best explanation I have is this. Some part of me knew before I knew. Some part of me had been watching the math not add up, the meetings I was excluded from, the credit that drifted sideways, the praise that came with conditions, and that part decided to build a record even when the rest of me still believed in the man holding the pen. Instinct is not magic. It is pattern recognition that has not yet reached your conscious mind. And if your instinct is telling you to keep records, to save emails, to document what feels undocumentable, listen to it. Even if you cannot explain why, especially if you cannot explain why. I manage a team of 47 people now. My first policy change was to require dual signature documentation on all performance reviews. No coaching conversation exists unless both parties confirm it occurred. No performance concern is filed without the employee's written acknowledgement and a 14-day rebuttal window. David Langford applied to a logistics company in Charlotte 4 months after his termination. They called Kessler Hadley for a reference. Arthur Ridley took the call personally. I do not know what he said. I did not ask. Some doors close without your hand on the knob, and that is exactly how they should close. If you are someone whose boss praises you in private and undermines you in rooms you cannot see, I am not going to tell you what to do, but I will tell you what I did. I listened to the hum. I built the archive. And when the folder came, I did not break. I opened it. What would you do if the person who taught you everything used that knowledge to take it all away? Would you fight with what they gave you? Or would you decide that the tools were always yours? This story is entirely fictional, created for entertainment and reflection. But if something in it felt familiar, if your stomach tightened at the word consistency, or your hands went still when I described that folder, then this story was already yours before I told it. The feelings it raised are real, even if the names are not, and those feelings deserve your attention.